Greetings, everyone. My name is Archie Green, Support and Education Coordinator for NAMI Greater Cleveland. Welcome to Hineni, Mental Health in Judaism. It is an honor and a privilege to have you all here tonight, where we are speaking in our faith-based initiative, which has been going on for the most of 2021 and will be continuing in 2022. Before we get started and I introduce our keynote speaker, I'd like to just give a brief overview of NAMI Greater Cleveland. NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, founded in 1979, is the nation's largest grassroots mental health organization dedicated to building better lives for millions of Americans affected by mental illness. It started with two moms who wanted better for their sons. Our mission is to empower people living with mental illness and their families to achieve a better quality of life by providing support, info, referrals, and advocacy. We know that education plays a critical role in reducing stigma. In addition to presentations like tonight's, we also provide courses taught by NAMI certified teachers and highly trained volunteers who either have lived experience or are family members. These courses give information on diagnosis, treatment services, communication skills, and coping strategies. We offer support groups for family members, peers, and both. We also operate a helpline, which is live Monday, through Friday from 9 to 5, which can be reached at 216-875-7776. To find out what's going on in our calendar events, please head over to namigreatercleveland.org. NAMI Greater Cleveland is able to offer all of our programming free of charge due to the generosity of our funders. Please be sure to complete the post-presentation evaluation from SurveyMonkey so we can continue to serve the community and do our part in helping everyone live their healthiest lives. Now, we'll be putting the SurveyMonkey link in the chat. We ask that if you have a chance, it should take no longer than 5 minutes, that you do fill that out, because we report that data back to our funders to ensure that we can continue free quality programming just like the one tonight. The title Hineni in Hebrew stands for stillness, or being present, which is a key to living a mentally healthy life. And at this time, I wanted to introduce our keynote speaker, who will be speaking from the perspective of Judaism in mental health as a behavioral specialist. Daniel Solganik is the Director of Behavioral Health Services at NAMI Cleveland, a nonprofit organization focused on strengthening the emotional and mental well-being of the Cleveland Jewish community. Daniel has spent the last 14 years working in various roles in the mental health field. In 2007, Daniel began working in residential treatment at Belfair Jewish Children's Bureau. After receiving a master's in social service administration from Case Western Reserve University, Daniel accepted a position at Beachbrook as a school-based clinical therapist. In addition to Daniel's full-time position, he's acted as team leader for the boys group at Attendinu. Daniel played an important role in helping boys to learn to understand and appreciate themselves, their families, their religion, and their community. In 2015, Daniel joined the private practice J. Burke and Associates. In this role, he has provided individual and family therapy, both in person and over telehealth. And for the past 3.5 years, Daniel has been employed by Ohio Guidestone as a supervisor in the outpatient counseling program. In Daniel's role at NALA, he provides supervision to staff, gives guidance on complex cases, assists in program development, provides training, and ensures compliance with legal and clinical standards of the industry. At this time, I'd like to welcome to the stage Daniel Solganik.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, I'm going to assume that we can. First, before I really get into what we're here to talk about, I'd just like to first express my appreciation for NAMI and for the opportunity to be part of such an amazing event that aligns shockingly well with my personal passion and professional mission, along with the overall mission of NAMI Cleveland, an amazing organization where I serve as the Director of Behavioral Services. I'll go further into what we do in the overlap with this event shortly. So now I'm going to start my slides. Partnering with NAMI and working together in the mission of combating stigma is something that could not be of higher importance to me. NALA and the community as a whole, it is an honor and a humbling experience to be invited. The purpose of tonight's event is to expand our understanding of the relationship between Judaism and mental health and break down the resistance that members of the Jewish community might have to seeking help and receiving mental health services. The Jewish community is no stranger to stigma, and in some ways is exacerbated by the tight-knit nature of the community. The concerns caused by stigmatization of mental health issues and the treatment are amplified due to the tremendous overlap between people's personal, professional, and spiritual relationships. The very thing that makes our community strong, supportive, and caring sometimes is the very same quality that deters people from seeking the help that they desperately need.
Hey, Daniel, sorry
Yes.
to interrupt. Did you share your screen? Because it looks like we're not seeing your slides.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not surprising because, you know, I'm me. Hold on, and boom, boom. Here we go.
There we go. There we go. Perfect.
Beautiful. Okay, continuing. Now, before I go much further, I really feel like it's important for me to introduce myself to emphasize kind of what led me to this place and the passion that I have. I am the Director of Behavioral Services at NALA, and I believe in the mission and the work deeply. And I'm a qualified mental health professional who's been in the field for just around 15 years. And in many ways, I can speak to Jewish customs and values and concerns of the community and the norms because I'm part of it. I'm also just Daniel, and my passion for mental health treatment and stigma goes back quite a ways in my personal life. And thought I'd share a little bit of it right now to kind of explain kind of where that all comes from. Growing up, I had an older brother named Adam. He was less than 2 years older than me. And he clearly struggled in one way or another. While he was incredibly brilliant and good at an incredibly wide range of things, he struggled. And in hindsight, he probably had issues with low self-esteem or anxiety or depression. It's difficult to know. No one can really be sure what happened. But he coped with it by self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. And in some ways, this was very effective for him. It helped him connect with other people. He felt cool. He had fun. But it grew and it spiraled out of control until in October of 2004, he passed away from a drug overdose. Had people really understood mental health, had they known how to get him guidance and treatment and have early intervention, maybe would have helped him from retreating into a world of drugs, and had understood the warning signs, maybe this would have been prevented. No one did anything wrong. And I repeat, no one did anything wrong. There were many people that tried to help, but a lot of it was reactive versus preventative. It's become my life's ambition to use my personal experience and let the impact of this tragedy live on to inspire others to take the courageous journey and let the impact into the mental health treatment and seek guidance. People do not need to suffer, nor do they need to cope in ways that are destructive or dangerous. My brother was a wonderful guy, and this was devastating, but it's not to happen needlessly, and people do not need to suffer in silence. Now I want to just dive a little bit deeper into what NALA does and what I do. Our mission is simple and yet wildly complex. We work to identify the mental health needs of the community and meet them by strengthening the emotional well-being and the mental health in the Jewish community. This cannot be done without simultaneously breaking down the walls that are erected by stigma. It is important to note that while our organization was designed and created to aid the Jewish community, is open to and already has helped many people from different communities struggling and is not knowing, and we don't discriminate based on any kind of religious affiliation, but this was our main driving force. NALA was committed to combating stigma, and we use panel discussions, presentations, provide confidential and free mental health referrals, and partner with local Jewish schools and synagogues, provide free cultural competency trainings to clinicians, all in an effort of helping our members of our community with the idea that it is not a contradiction to practice our religion and have tremendous faith, but also seek professional help when struggling with mental health or substance use issues. Now, it's easy to imagine that some people might rely on faith to meet their mental health needs. And often it's very unrelated what their mental health needs are versus what their spiritual needs are. But oftentimes people feel that they're connected. Though many components of Judaism can be an aid to helping people through difficult times, it's common that we need to look to outside guidance and support. And this is not antithetical to Jewish values. I would also like to take a moment to note that NALA is not alone in this mission that we just described. We partner with many organizations, including the Jewish Federation, the JFSA, Belfort Jewish Children's Bureau, and a multitude of other organizations. And we all collaborate and have a shared passion for helping our various communities and help them overcome mental health struggles. Okay, now I'd like to go through some ideas of what might tie together mental health, Judaism, and expand our overall understanding of what this connection really is. First, we must identify kind of what creates the whole person, what impacts who we are, what makes us us. What is wellness? What accounts for the wellness of an individual? The well-being of an individual, a couple, a family, it's all impacted by many things in multiple areas of our life, including internally and externally. Some are internal in nature. Things like experiencing symptoms of depression, ADHD, obsessive compulsive disorder, bipolar disorder, motivation, relationships with our higher power, self-esteem, and self-worth. While these are all internal experiences, these are also impacted by what's going on around us. Circumstantial or external life stress can take a significant toll on our mental and emotional well-being. Things like educational difficulties, economic struggles, and coping with complicated family members. And others are kind of a combination of internal and external, whether it's physical health or fitness or some combination of all these things. They're all contributing parts to our overall wellness, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Seeking help to work on the internal struggles and seeking the guidance of a professional that might lead us to changing our external circumstances can be a major driving force in bettering ourself and our well-being. The holistic approach is one that I subscribe to. Whether it's food or fitness, sleep habits, the relationships we have with others, having a healthy spiritual relationship with a higher power and our community, success academically or professionally, and yes, emotional and mental well-being are all part of having wellness and success and feeling a sense of connectedness. Now you might be wondering, but Daniel, how does this tie into the actual practice and culture of Judaism? Well, I wanted to go through a few examples that I think might kind of paint a picture of what the relationship is. First, I wanted to note that there's a really, really famous book that's been around for, I don't even know how long, called Pirkei Avot, translates to Ethics of Our Father. It teaches the importance to us of acquiring a friend, a rabbi, and a mentor. It's a deep idea that's widely accepted. So what do we learn from that? We learn that it is a long-standing value of our religion and our culture to seek out the benefits of looking to others who know things that we might not know and lean on others when we need the support. And then I wrote down the word hishtadlus. What is hishtadlus? It really just translates to effort. In Judaism, we believe that we are expected to put in effort. We only rely on God to do the rest of it as a complement to our individual efforts. We don't just rely on faith exclusively. We actually need to do the work. In combination with having faith, I mean, that can be very helpful, both spiritually and emotionally, but really the expectation is that we do the hard work necessary. And in combination with that, there's a very famous idea in Judaism that we are only given tests that we are capable of overcoming. We are given unique struggles that no two persons has the same test and no two struggles are identical. Just like no two people's paths are identical, no skills are identical, and no life is identical. We can overcome the obstacles that are in front of us. And taking care of our mental health is an important part of taking care of ourselves. Now, Rabbi Hirschfeld is a person I just felt like we should quote because he's on our website. We quoted him. He's a significant rabbi and a leader of the Jewish community of Cleveland. And we have a quote of him saying, taking care of your mental health is as important as taking care of your physical health, because without both, we cannot thrive. We can't thrive individually, we can't thrive as a family, and we certainly can't thrive as a community. And the last thing I wanted to note to kind of tie it all together is that there is a well-accepted idea that within Judaism, we have a hierarchy of needs. We have values, but the values are not rigid. The values are amongst a series of values. Like one example I wanted to bring is, most people know this, a lot of observant Jews, all observant Jews really, don't drive on Shabbat. But if there's something serious going on, if there's a life-threatening emergency, you get in the car and you drive to the hospital, because we have a hierarchy of needs. And at the highest level of those needs is having physical, emotional, and mental health. And seeking that health is completely tied to the observance of Judaism. So there's also this famous idea that the three things that the world stands on are Torah, Avoda, and Gemilat Chasadim. What do these things translate to and what do they mean? So Torah, routine, commitment, appreciation, values, doing the mitzvot, whether it's what we eat, how we treat others, it's an all-encompassing manual of how we really should live our lives. Avoda, it literally just means work, whether that means doing actual work and contributing to the world and providing for your family, or it means actually doing the hard work that it takes to be the best version of you that can be. And the last one is loving kindness and sharing with others. So I wanted to just mention an amazing person from our community who passed away sadly a few years ago, named Mendy Klein. I actually heard someone mention at his shiva that there's ups and downs in his career, and even though he was very, very wealthy and very, very generous, there were ups and downs in his own career. And one time someone came to him and said, you should stop giving so much because it might affect your own ability to give more in the future. And he said, that's all the more reason for me to give, because only when we give can we really get back. We are only rewarded for our giving when we can continue to give in spite of how difficult it is. And I think that that really encapsulates a pivotal value of our culture and community and a religious practice, which is giving and helping others is a huge part of what we do and how we help our community and our culture stay strong. Okay, so my role at NALA, I get phone calls all the time. And one of the most common reasons that people call me is anxiety. What is anxiety? Okay, well, anxiety, as I like to put it, is the experience of obsessing over what has already happened and the relentless thoughts of what may happen in the future. I once heard someone say, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift, and that's why they call it the present. Jewish practices mirror the power of living in the present throughout the day and having gratitude in our lives. So I have a few key examples of kind of what this looks like. Brachot for food. We don't just eat. We actually have to take a second and be mindful of what we're eating. We have to think about, where did this food come from? And then have a specific prayer that matches up with what that food is. Like if it's fruit, we have to remember, oh, well, the fruit grows from the tree, and then you say the prayer that matches it accordingly. It brings your attention to what you're doing now. So you're not focused on what was and what will be, you're focused on now. And this is kind of a funny example, but I think it's important to mention. Asher Yatzar is a blessing that we say when we use the restroom, after we use the restroom. It's literally a prayer to bring our attention to the fact that using the restroom is an example of our body functioning correctly. And we should bring our attention to that because it's an important thing and we should have appreciation for it. One of the most continuous practices and a focal point of Judaism is the observance of Shabbat. On Shabbat, we are taught to be present. We don't eat on the go. We sit with our family, our friends, our community members, and we engage in the meal. We experience that we are supposed to be there mentally for. Additionally, the prayers on Shabbat are a little bit lengthier than normal. And I think that that might be because we're supposed to be a little bit extra attentive, especially on a day where we don't have to worry about getting to work or taking care of outside responsibilities. So it's all the more time to focus on the here and now. We avoid traveling, packing, cooking. Many things we don't do on Shabbat are the things that focus on what's to come. We experience the importance and the function of focusing on the here and now. Even in the darkest times, we focus on the here and now. When a person passes away, we are taught not to celebrate what once was or distract ourselves from what will be. We sit Shiva and we experience the grief, and this is all part of the healing process. Similarly, prayer. We pray 3 times a day. Much of it's repetitive, but simultaneously quite meaningful. This is kind of like a form of meditation to many people. We separate ourselves from the lives for a brief period of time. We focus on the words that are written and with the meaning, but we say them, and we say them continuously. And this in many ways is like a mindfulness exercise that a person might learn when they go to therapy. It's a well-accepted idea, as you can see on the right there, that meditation is a very therapeutic experience that brings your consciousness to the here and now. When a person is struggling with anxiety, for example, they often need to develop strategies for mindfulness. These methods to overcome the debilitating experience of worrying about what was and what might come, but focusing your conscious mind on what is and what is happening now is something that is incredibly impactful to decrease the intensity of people's symptoms. And this goes hand in hand with something that most observant Jews are already doing. And as you can see by those 2 pictures, there's incredible parallels. And another example I just thought was worth noting. There's a famous mindfulness exercise of looking around the room, identifying 5 things that you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can taste, and 1 thing that you can smell. And every single week when we separate ourselves from the Shabbat, we look at the fire, we drink the wine, we smell the spices, and we say the blessings. There's so much overlap between being mindful of what's happening in the present and the therapeutic exercises that one might learn to cope with anxiety that one can't help but notice the overlap between the 2. Now, I thought it was important to mention stages of change. Once we know that there's no problem seeking help and we break down the walls of stigma, acknowledgement of the importance of a professional guidance in all areas of life, it is completely typical, and honestly, it's healthy to oscillate between the various stages of change. It's important to know this, so we don't get frustrated with our own ups and downs, and we remain compassionate to those that we care about, and we can weather the storms and endure the process of seeking help. So I wanted to share a quick story that I had recently in my role of a anonymous adolescent girl from the community, clearly struggling with depression. She was struggling with self-worth and the pressures of life and anxiety and fear, and she would bounce back and forth. Sometimes she would say, maybe there's nothing wrong with me. Maybe I'm just, maybe I'm just in my own head and I need to just relax. And then other times she would say, well, maybe I need a therapist. And other times she would say, yes, I'm committed. I'm going to therapy. And then she'd bounce back and forth. This is a normal part of the process. And this is when we need to act. We need to jump on those opportunities, because when we do hit that contemplation time or we're preparing to it, that's the time where it's important to commit, make a plan, and start that next step of action. Because once we start that step of action, then we can actually start the ball rolling of actually healing ourselves. We are strong, much stronger than we think. We're much more resilient than we know, and we can overcome the obstacles with our faith, with support, with compassion of others, and the compassion that we have for ourselves, and when appropriate, with professional help. All right, the long-awaited slide, COVID and its impact on our ability to thrive. Okay, the ripple effects of this time period has impacted literally everyone. Many people have been prevented from engaging in the very things that kept them mentally well. From going to synagogue and experiencing the connection that they usually have with a higher power, to the connections with our Rebbeim, to the connections with our community, missing simchas and celebrations, and even missing the very end of life with those that we cherish most. These are issues that have escalated the intensity of people's mental health struggles and the emotional issues to heights that I have never seen in my career. And many people I've spoken to have never seen and might have not experienced at all in recent history. Anxiety, depression, struggles in marriage, pressures and stress of working from home and homeschooling your kids and trying to cook dinner while you're trying to stay connected with your friends, and always feels like you're almost treading water in a relentless sea and barely keeping your head above water. The importance of feeling connected has never been more evident. The connection with our family, with our community, with the schools in our community, with the synagogues, to a higher power and to ourselves. This has led many people down a path that is worthy of redirection, but a path that no less is correctable. When an individual is lacking connection, is stressed or anxious or depressed, and other emotional struggles that come up from time to time, that's when seeking help is the most important and worthy of our support and admiration, because taking that first step is often the one that takes the most courage. So this sounds a little bit silly, but it's just a reality. The Jewish community, we are a community that is invested in specialization. You know, if even as simple as a plumber, most Jews I know, they're not going to even call a plumber until they know 4 or 5 guys. I know a guy who knows a guy. They want referrals. They want to know who's specialized. You know, the metaphor that for some reason, I don't know why, I always rely on is dentistry. You know, if you're struggling with your teeth, you don't try and diagnose your own cavity. You don't try and fill your own cavity. And you most certainly don't just go to the first dentist you've ever heard of. You look into it. You decide who's the best fit for you. And then you seek the help from an expert. Even if handyman or a mechanic, this is something that is kind of just like intertwined with our culture and our norms. And, you know, it's funny because it's a stereotype, but it actually comes from a little bit of truth. And I think that this is something that's worthy of knowing. And I think it's something that's actually can be a beautiful thing. But for some reason, mental health tends to be something that's different for people. They self-diagnose, they self-help, they try and tough their way through it. They kind of self-blame or who knows what people are doing. But really, this is no different than any other specialization that people are seeking to get guidance on. Call someone who needs to help, who can help. Call NALA, call any organization. There are places to help, and these things can be overcome. All right, now I would just like to give some just practical insight into mental health, common struggles, and a little bit of the confusing things that are similar and yet very different. So for example, number 1, anxiety versus panic attacks. What are these things? Well, first of all, everyone has anxiety. You're going to a new job interview, well, you feel a little anxious. But when anxiety becomes something that's clinically significant, it's something that's impacting your daily life, and it's prohibiting you from engaging in the things that you normally would. It, again, is the obsession of what has happened and the fear of what will happen in the future. Panic attacks versus, on the other hand, are an acute, short-term explosion of anxiety where it feels almost like you're out of control. The world is racing around you. People feel like they're out of control. People feel like some people even say that they felt like they were having a heart attack. They're very different. They have different types of treatment, but they are treatable. Then I just wanted to note that there are situational mental health issues, and then there are chronic mental health issues. So adjustment to new circumstances, major life changes, you move to a new city, you get a new job. These are things that might provoke mental health situations, but can be usually coped with through some counseling or, you know, looking for guidance in oftentimes a very short-term way. Chronic mental health issues like major depressive disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, these are things that really might need a combination of different types of interventions, whether it's medication or, you know, even in a more extreme way, maybe even a hospitalization, but it's all part of the process. And people have ups and downs in the severity of these chronic illnesses. But again, if you follow the guidance of professionals, they are treatable and they are able to be overcome. Now, OCD, people throw around this term all the time. They don't know really what it means. It's become so normalized that people just throw it around. It's the idea that you're obsessing over thoughts and engaging in compulsive behaviors to seek relief from those thoughts. This at times actually has a little bit of a tie to spiritual practices. You know, I recently got a call from a man who has obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's a struggle that impacts most of his life. But it impacts his prayer service a lot because he has the obsessive thought that he might not be saying the words correctly, and then he compulsively repeats the words because that's the way he feels that he'll overcome that obsessive thought. This is something that is treatable. This is something that counseling can help with, and this is something that is worthy of seeking attention for. Now, there are significant red flags that people should know about, whether it's mania, depression, people that are avoiding their responsibilities, people that are saying self-harming thoughts or suicidal thoughts. These are things that need to be not ignored, not dismissed, and really taken on head on. While it's important to break down the stigma, the normalization of a lot of these statements have kind of made anxiety and depression become something that's easy to dismiss. Oh, you're just being anxious, you're just nervous. Oh, you're just depressed, that happens to everyone. It's just a phase, you'll get over it. We've all heard these things. Non-clinical use of clinical words leads people to sometimes be dismissive. I recently got a call from a mother of a teenage girl who was getting complaints from her school saying, we're really concerned about this girl. She's saying things like, life is helpless. I feel hopeless. She was clearly struggling. And the mom's response was, I think my daughter's just being dramatic. I feel like she's just copying the things that she hears other people say. This mother is not a bad person. This mother is impacted by stigma. She's afraid of the implications. And she's heard these words used so much in a non-clinical way that her inclination is to be dismissive because that makes sense from her experience. I also just wanted to note, I have that picture up there of climbing a mountain because a metaphor I always use for the mental health experience of getting help. It's kind of like you're climbing a mountain and your backpack is full of stones. It makes total sense to get a helping hand because sometimes those stones bear such a heavy weight on you that it feels like you can't bear the weight alone. But what's funny is then when you go to therapy, you're not just getting a helping hand carrying the heavy bag of stones. You unpack the stones to make it a little bit lighter so you can move on without the stones in your bag, without that heavy burden on your back. So this right here is a famous diagram that people show in many different educational experiences in the mental health world. And at the center of everyone's universe is themselves. Client recently told me that, after making a lot of progress in therapy, he now actually feels like he's the center of his own story versus the victim of some other story, or feels like he's, not even a character in the story. He's like an extra. We exist within a system that's within a system that's within a system. Our entire society is broken down into different systems. The individual affects the family affects the community and the school, and this works both ways. This is why I'm here. This is why we build each other up. We build up our awareness and we break down the stigma, because each individual can affect the big picture, and this is how we change the world and heal it. Okay. So we are awaiting the return to normal because COVID, when's it going to go away? We need to return to normal. I thought it was worth noting that that's not really how the Jewish people have ever really operated. Throughout time, we've adapted and adjusted and grown and thrived, whether it's a war, famines, expulsions, and even the most horrible things like attempted exterminations. We don't just endure and adjust and then return back to what it was like. We thrive and we build and we adjust. We don't just adapt, we recreate and we build. And this is not something that we should just do on a community or a cultural level. This is something that we can also do on an individual level. I thought it was worth noting that aliyah versus returning. It's a common thing that when people move to Israel, we call it making aliyah. What does that mean? Well, it means moving up. It's even the name really of my organization, our organization, NALA, which literally means to rise up. We rise up ourselves. We don't just return. We don't just overcome an obstacle and go back to where we were. We overcome it and we aim to continue developing and growing. We seek spiritual fulfillment. We seek learning and emotional and mental support. We seek rabbinic guidance. When we can finally return to all of our places of worship, we shouldn't just return. We should foster that experience, and we should develop our personal and spiritual connection to our community, to our rabbinic leadership, and to our overall community. Family. We don't just reconnect with our family, we foster and we build those relationships. If you have a family member who's struggling and has been emotionally impacted, we don't just sit back and we hope that they're going to get back to their normal life. We try and foster that relationship, we give advice, and we help them connect with professionals who can give them help. And even if they don't, we can get ourselves professional help to help us cope with them. And lastly, community. We don't just return to synagogue, we build that establishment. We don't just re-enter our community, we reconnect and foster those relationships. So an idea that I've always thought is incredibly meaningful and beautiful is the idea that Judaism is not just a religion. It is not just a system of foods. It's not a race. What is it? We are a people. We are a resilient people, and we are not just a group of values or ideas. We are a people that has a uniqueness because we have a portable suitcase which contains our entire identity. And we're able to foster in all kinds of circumstances. You know, there's stories that you hear of people even practicing the religious values in the darkest times. Even in World War II, I've heard stories of people lighting a menorah inside a concentration camp. These are things that are almost impossible for us to understand and difficult for us to relate to, but it shows the uniqueness and the resilience of our people. We didn't just come out of those dark times and go back to what we'd already built. We grew and we thrived. We helped each other. We developed new communities. We developed new identities. We developed new schools and businesses, and we helped each other. And we think that this applies to the overall culture, the religion, the community, but really these are all just groups of individuals doing work to thrive in spite of challenge. These are things that we can learn to do on an individual level to grow. Remember, regardless of your religious affiliation, whether you're Reformed, Conservative, Orthodox, or any other combination of affiliations, or you're completely unaffiliated, or you're not Jewish at all, being associated with this culture and this community is totally in coordination with wellness and mental health and treatment. Seeking help is part of our people's DNA, and we should embrace it as a community. And if someone is struggling, help them call. And again, I just want to end off with, again, saying thank you for the opportunity to NAMI for being part of such an amazing opportunity and such an important mission. I'd like to thank all of the partnering organizations that we've ever worked with, because without them, it's very difficult to get things going. And I'd also like to thank NAMI Cleveland, where I work, and Rabbi Hellman specifically, because it has been a lifelong ambition to be able to do what we're doing right here. And without NAMI Cleveland, it would be a difficult path to go. And the ability to use my personal passion and my professional experience to help those in need, help our community, and hopefully make an impact on healing the world. And on that, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. Just an amazing presentation. At this time, we open up the chat for questions. So if you have a question for Daniel, please type it in the chat. And our helpline volunteer coordinator, Melissa Koshi, will ask your question to Daniel. So feel free to type in a question in the chat if you have one.
Thank you for the intro, Archie, and I'm thankful for the opportunity to be a part of this tonight and sit in and learn with you all and grow with you all. And I'd like to pull up the chat here and see if we have any questions directed towards Daniel. There is not a question and answer box, so you guys can go ahead and just drop them right in the chat.
So I've actually got a question for you, Daniel. Can you speak on one of the things you talked about was the number one case or common cause that your clients approach you with is anxiety. Can you speak on, why you believe that is? Is it because of the pandemic? Even pre-pandemic, was that still the case? Was anxiety number one?
So first of all, I think that might be, it's like a multi-factored kind of a thing. I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to put my finger on it exactly, but I have a couple of thoughts. First of all, if someone's struggling with anxiety, I think it's maybe possible that it might be the least stigmatized thing, because I think we all experience some level of anxiety throughout our lives. It's probably the most normalized type of mental health issue. So maybe people are struggling with other things and they call and say, I'm struggling with anxiety, because maybe the stigma of other mental health issues is prohibiting them from doing so. And that being said, I do think the COVID situation has exacerbated people's already existing anxieties to a huge extent. I mean, I've heard people talk about how, like, you know, when you go from, I go to work, I come home, I have my evening responsibilities, and then I come home, that it goes from that to being home all the time, the chaos of just your personal life and the professional life and balancing all of your things. It can be so much on people. And I don't really know if that's the only, or that's the thing that's been exacerbated the most. But I do think as a country, and I'm not saying that this was a bad thing, but I do think that the, you know, be afraid, wear a mask, don't go places, don't talk to people, I think that that has really, really, really affected people's anxiety, because how could you not feel anxious in a world where it's already tremendously uncertain and there's already existing risks, but now you can't even talk to your closest friends who lives right next door to you because, like, you could get sick. It's it has had an impact on people. And I will also tell you, I think the anxiety of, like, going to class is already there. But now you have the added anxiety of, like, you have to log in and you have to do it over the computer and technology issues. I think that that's played a major role.
Thank you,
Daniel. And we do have a couple questions popping in here. So one of them is, you haven't mentioned the role of medication towards wellness within the Jewish community. Is there a stigma towards using modern medication within the different sections of Judaism? And could you please address the different sections?
It is such a great question, because one might think that there might be a difference. So I spent the first 13 years of my career essentially working with communities that had nothing to do with the Jewish community. And then for the last year and a half, I've worked almost exclusively within the Jewish community, and I get what amounts to about 80 calls a month. So do the math. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people I've talked to. And one of the questions I ask is, are you on medication? Are you open to medication? And is that an opportunity that you want to pursue as part of your treatment plan? And I have found that the receptiveness to medication as an option mirrors very, very similarly to almost every community I've worked in, which is most people are saying, look, if that's something that I need to do or something my kid needs to do, we're open to it. It's not my first option. I'd prefer to not take medication, because who wants to take medication? But if that's something that I need to move forward with, I'm open to the idea. But kind of part of our funny cultural stereotype is here is the difference, though. You know, I've been in some communities where you're like, oh, I need a psychiatrist, okay. And then they go to the nearest big agency or hospital or whatever. And in our community, they're like, I want to know the psychiatrist that you recommend who specializes in the thing that I'm struggling with. And I want to get the best guidance from the best one. And a lot of times my job, actually, as weird as it sounds, is to identify and empathize with whether or not the unique situation that this person's struggling with actually needs the best psychiatrist, or it's like, look, you're struggling with anxiety and you need to go to a psychiatrist who knows about anxiety. Like, most psychiatrists are going to know how to help you with your anxiety. So sometimes I have to kind of tone down that the inclination that some people have naturally to seek the best and get that really, really intense referral. But I have found that there's a very similar approach to medication in our community as every other community.
Thank you, Daniel. And we have another question here. What do you regard as healthy signs of integration of faith while growing through your mental health challenges?
Integration of your faith.
Yeah, so it's like, what do you regard as the healthy signs that, you know, you're in your faith while also growing through your mental health challenges?
Well, one of the things I think that happens in people's spiritual pursuits is oftentimes a desire to kind of keep up with the Joneses, to look up a specific part, or like go to the place where you think other people want you to be, or be this person that you don't really feel inside. And I think that a sign of someone's mental and emotional well-being tied to its spiritual growth is when people kind of say, like, you know what, I want to find where I fit. I want to find the rabbi that I connect with. I don't want to just go where people expect me to go. I want to go to the places that I feel comfortable. And when you kind of see people not shift synagogue affiliations because they're running away from relationships, but because they're seeking relationships and they're trying to build and foster their relationship with a place where they actually feel connected, I think that that's a big part of it. And I also think, as funny as it sounds, some of the times the way that people pray and the contentness they show while they're praying. Like, I actually recently had a conversation with a guy who said, I have so much anxiety that when I go to synagogue to pray, I stand in the back and I just pace back and forth, just waiting for it to be over because I feel like I'm crawling out of my skin. I'm like, that's not good. Like, first of all, maybe you need a different place, or maybe you need to see a therapist and work out some coping strategies to deal with that. Or maybe you do need medication to tone down the intensity that you're experiencing while you're in these environments. But I'd say if you look around and someone is casually sitting and enjoying the prayer service, that's probably a decent sign that they're coping well with their emotions. And if someone looks wildly uncomfortable sitting calmly and listening to someone speak or saying prayers that they've probably said thousands of times, I would say that's probably an indication that they need some additional help.
Thank you, Daniel. Great answers. And you know, a bit off topic, I was kind of wondering, at the temple or synagogue that you practice at, and this is a question that I'm actually asking, do they speak English or Hebrew?
That's a great question. So I am affiliated with a place called Green Road Synagogue. Rabbi Blau is the rabbi there. He's actually the president of the American Rabbinical Council. So I don't know, he's an interesting guy, smart as they come. But I would say the bulk of the actual prayers are written and said in Hebrew, but the books, the Sidurim that we use there's always the translation on the other side. And I've asked big rabbis in Israel and in America, there is no imperative to say it in Hebrew, especially if you have no idea what you're saying. So like, it's better to know what you're saying and say it in English. And usually it's the prayers and the actual reading of the Torah is in Hebrew, but then the sermon or the explanations or like the communication that's done with the congregation as a whole is done in English. But that does vary based on where you go. Like, I happen to know a synagogue personally where most of the people there are Israeli and they speak Hebrew. And it's like, it's harder for them to speak in English than to speak in Hebrew. And I also know a place that speaks mostly Yiddish. And when the rabbi gets up to speak, there's kind of like this meshing of English and Yiddish and a little bit of Hebrew, because that's kind of like the language that they speak in that part of the community.
Thank you, Daniel. And it looks like we have time for one more question that just came through. What role should our synagogues play in identifying congregants with mental struggles and providing guidance to them?
That is, first of all, I love that question. Who asked that question? I don't know who asked that question, but thank you.
It was John Epstein.
Great job, good question. And I will tell you, that might be the most important thing, in my humble opinion, that NALA as an organization has done, which is developed relationships and open the line of communication between mental health professionals and all of the rabbinical leadership of the observant community. And it started in the observant community, but it's trickled outside of the more observant community. But we have ongoing dialogue with basically all of the rabbis of the congregations, all of the rabbis of the schools, all of the Jewish private schools in the community. I have dialogue with them almost ongoing, kind of processing through what are the signs and symptoms, what are the red flags you're seeing? Because as we all know, if there are red flags that don't go addressed, they oftentimes grow to the point where a kid that was 12 and could have gotten help, now they're 17 and they're doing really scary things. And why should we let that happen? That's totally bizarre. And the rabbis in the school, the teachers in the school, the principals, the rabbis of the congregations, those are the people that oftentimes are kind of like the first responder. They're the ones seeing it happen right there. So we run the analytics of our calls. I keep documentation of everything we do. It's all extraordinarily confidential. Nobody else sees it, but we see it so that we can keep track of it. Well, we get calls from rabbis, teachers, principals, the rebbeim of the different synagogues, and I mean like on a probably multiple time a week basis. To just, sometimes there's not even a crisis. It's like, hey, I noticed this thing. This person said this thing to me. Should I be concerned? What kind of guidance should I give? And again, it's all anonymous. It's completely confidential. It's free. So I think it's been a big benefit to a lot of people. So do I think that it's their responsibility? I don't know if I want to put that on them, but I do think because they are the first one to respond and they're oftentimes the trusted person to the family, like when someone's having a marriage problem, especially in the observant community, almost always the first person they go to for a little guidance is the rabbi. And sometimes the rabbi gives guidance and it's a beautiful thing and the marriage gets better. And other times the rabbi says, you need continuous help to work on your communication or your conflict resolution. And then they call us and then we facilitate the communication. And because we're connected with 180, 190 mental health professionals all over the county, we have a varying kind of database of professionals and specializations. So when people come to us with these varying needs, I can give them the referral right there so they don't have to call their insurance and get a list of 500 therapists all over the place. They have no idea who does what and they have to go to a million websites. It almost adds to their stress and anxiety. And most people that I know are like, I don't have time for that. It's like, and then they didn't get help and now they can kind of get the help they need.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. What a wonderful answer. And I think, at the same time, if you're looking for resources and you need a little bit of direction, you can always call me here on the helpline as well.
Call NAMI. They're good too.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Archie.
By the way, I got a direct question. So one of the question was, that was asking me directly, is there a problem with having your eye on the present, your eye on the past, and your eye on the future, as well as having the flexibility to go in and out of those spheres? And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. This is why, as a community, we are constantly learning and researching the things of our past and the culture that we've had historically. And we're also discussing what mitzvahs are coming up, what is the next celebration, what is the next holiday. But when it really comes down to it, we need to have a continuous ability on a daily basis to focus on the present and be present for our lives, because that's how we can be a mindful person and be calm and living in the moment. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. There's also a question about intergenerational trauma, which I think is worthy of noting. The question is, do you think there's an intergenerational trauma between the Holocaust that is impacting Jews now? So first of all, the answer is yes. And the answer that I can give you most directly is there is a pervasive fear of dogs that in the overall community of America sounds so strange. But a lot of people are like, well, my great-great-grandfather told me that dogs are to be feared because during the war, dogs were used in a threatening manner. So yes, I do think that plays a role. And I think that sometimes that is part of we can't trust the system. We can't trust people in power, but this is why we're trying to help it from within so that people can say, oh, well, maybe there is a resource for this help of people that do understand my community and my culture. And it's not coming from a top-down approach, it's coming from a within approach. So yeah, I do think there's intergenerational trauma, but I do think it can be met.
We just sat and witnessed Daniel Solganik of NAMI Cleveland give a riveting keynote address over the subject, and we're going to continue the conversation. At this time, we're going to engage in a panel discussion. And at the end of the panel discussion, we will once again have time for question and answers in the audience. So feel free within the chat to type in the questions that you may have. The first panelist that I'll bring to the stage, we all just got a chance to hear his excellent presentation, Daniel Solganik. All right. And I'll now introduce our two other panelists. Rabbi Shana Nyer joined the Suburban Temple Kol Ami community as Director of Lifelong Learning in July 2012. After serving Temple B'nai Shalom in Fairfax Station, Virginia for 9 years as first assistant, then associate rabbi and educator. Before arriving in Northern Virginia, Shana earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in Jewish Studies at the University of Maryland and then studied at Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion in New York, where in addition to achieving her ordination in 2003, she earned a Master of Arts in Hebrew Literature in 2002 and her Master of Arts in Religious Education in 2016. Rabbi Shana is also the Jewish educator at Camp Wise in Chardon, Ohio, returning to her childhood summer home. Rabbi Shana loves teaching students of all ages and is passionate about advocating for the inclusion of all learners. She has published 2 articles on the subject. 1, How to Say Yes, and to Inclusion, and Creating Sacred Partnerships, Parents and Educators Working Together to Meet the Needs of All Learners. Rabbi Shana is a gifted storyteller who loves to teach Jewish values through the medium and gets excited when her lessons combine her knowledge and passion for Judaism and her interest in all things pop culture. When she is not at work, Rabbi Shana enjoys spending time with her lovely daughter, Emily. Welcome to the stage, Rabbi Shana Nyer. And now our last panelist, Deena Nyer Mendlowitz. Deena is a stand-up comedian and improviser who was recently named one of Ohio's funniest women by Cleveland.com. Deena was also on to promote mental health awareness and to destigmatize mental illness. Her work has been featured in a variety of places, including NPR and USA Today. Deena is the creator of Funnel Cakes Not Included, a one-woman show about living with mental illness and mental illness and friends, a live mental health comedy talk show. She's also the co-founder of Cleveland's popular Mass Hysteria Improv Comedy Fest, a comedy fest run by women for everyone. Welcome to the stage, Deena Nyer Mendlowitz. Welcome, everyone. I think I can, speak for everyone in the audience. What we witnessed was an amazing presentation by Daniel. And I just wanted for us to kind of just continue in conversation. And I think one of the things that I wanted to start our conversation with is really with Deena, because Deena, you also have lived experience. You use humor as a means to cope with your mental illness. Can you speak about the process that you went to find help, to seek out help, and that transition into using humor as a way to advocate for mental health?
Yeah, I about 20-some years ago had attempted to end my life, and spoiler alert, I survived. So I'm still here and grateful for that. Most days, not every day. And I went and have sought out therapy and have done anything there really is. I've had electroshock therapy. I've had magnetic therapy. There's not much I won't try. I'm take medication on a daily basis. When I moved back to Cleveland in 2002, there was a second city here, and I started taking comedy classes. And I performed improv comedy for years. And then I started writing about my mental health experience and using humor. This is the thing, people don't want to hear about mental health. They don't want to hear about living with suicidal thoughts. They don't want to hear about the scary and the awful. So in order for me to get people to hear about the scary or awful, I use humor. So because people will listen to comedy, people will come. And now I do this mental health comedy show, and people come to listen to a show all about mental illness. And I've got them through the door because I said, we're going to laugh too, but we're going to laugh, but we're also going to give everyone in the audience permission to get help if they're not getting help. I have people bring a spouse to the show. The person lives with mental illness, and they want their spouse to hear somebody talking about mental illness. And so to me, comedy is just my trick. It's what I love. I love doing it. It brings me joy. But it's also, okay, this is how I could get some people to listen to what they don't want to listen to.
That's great. I myself, out in addition to the work I do here at NAMI, I'm a hip hop artist, and I use music in the same way that you use comedy to break the stigma, start that conversation. So for those of you in the audience who don't know, Rabbi Shana and Deena are sisters. And this next question I wanted to ask you, Rabbi Shana, can you speak just the experience for those in the audience who may have a family member that lives with mental illness, the best way to approach someone and advocate for someone who's living with the mental illness?
I have my own chronic illness that has nothing, it's a physical illness. But first of all, what it has taught me is my particular illness is Crohn's. And what I learned is when you've met one person with Crohn's, you've met one person with Crohn's. And I think that's probably true of every disease out there. Like, you can't assume because you know somebody with Crohn's, you now know all about the disease, or because you know somebody with diabetes or cancer or whatever, put in, fill in disease here. And I think the same is true with people who have mental illness. And I think Deena posts a lot on Facebook. And one of the posts she always has is, it originally said physical illness is the same as mental illness, and she crossed out the same, and it's physical illness is mental illness, like our part of our body. So it's really the same. And we always talk about the golden rule, which is treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I actually say what living with illness has taught me is that's actually, you need to live by, somebody defined it as the platinum rule, treat others the way they would want to be treated. With the caveat, we have to teach people what works for us, because our tendency, which is natural, is to do what is comforting to us. But what comforting to me may not at all be comforting, and maybe the exact opposite of comforting to Deena or Daniel or you. So I think there's been a lot of trial and error as Deena has taken this journey and we've taken it with her. And it's a lot about asking questions and, how can I be there for you? And what is the best way to advocate for you? And spoiler alert, I'm not perfect. Some people are, maybe. I am not. And I've made a lot of mistakes along the way, but what I try and do is learn and grow from them. And do the best you can. And I think the one thing that
she's really good. I just want to get that in there. She's really good. I have her in my corner, and it's been trial and error for both of us, and she's a lot better than she's letting on.
Well, thank you. But I also think that yes, it's never giving up and not getting frustrated with yourself, but also just being willing to be in there with it and keep figuring it out. Because I do think even like it's the person who has been the sick person, like you don't always know what you need, and you think you know what you need, and then you realize that that's super not helpful. So I think it's just sticking it out and just knowing that it also changes. Sometimes it's one thing and sometimes it's another, and that's okay too.
Yeah. So can I just add one thing to that?
Sure.
It's interesting. I also think that a thing you can do to support loved ones who are struggling, whether it's mental health issues or substance use issues. I think one of my cousins who's been in recovery from alcoholism for like 25 years, he's an amazing guy. He says he doesn't even like to bring it up because it always ends up with him trying to being kind of put in a position where he has to counsel the other guy. Oh, you're in recovery? Sometimes I wonder if I drink too much. Like, how do I know if I drink too much? It's like, if you're trying to join with someone and show empathy, don't turn the conversation into you. Oh, you have depression? Yeah, sometimes I feel really low. I don't know what to do when I'm feeling low. What should I do? It's like, I don't want to be your therapist. Like, why are we talking about you all of a sudden? Like, the person I'm talking about, he's like, when I go to a place where people are drinking, I get myself a seltzer and I put a lime in it because I don't want people to ask, because I don't want to talk about them. Which I think is true. So passionate, but don't turn it into a conversation about yourself.
Absolutely. I actually wanted to direct the next question to you, Daniel. One of the things that you spoke about in your presentation was a scenario where, during Shabbat, it's standard that you walk to service, but if there's an emergency, whether mental health, physical, whatever the case, you get in the car and you drive. So can you talk about, balancing, and I would open this up to Rabbi Shana as well, balancing the biblical teachings, the times of prayer and some of the traditions, but also knowing when it's time to seek out real help. It's
So-
time to go to a NALA or a NAMI.
It's an extraordinary question. And this is one of the things I think that's actually quite beautiful about our community, is this relationship that's usually very ongoing between whoever your rabbinic leadership is and yourself. Like in the Orthodox world, there's an idea called a heter. What is a heter? Good question. A heter is essentially when a person needs to, on an individual level, deviate from the traditional way that a person typically operates. Like I know someone who got a heter to drive to a church on Shabbat to go to an AA meeting because there was such a high risk of relapse that the rabbi that he went to for guidance was like, not only are you allowed to break Shabbat in order to drive to the church on Shabbat to go to AA, but you must because it's a life-saving endeavor. And that was kind of the way he did it. Like, I don't carry a phone on me on Shabbat, but there was a time where a woman in the community was under so much duress from her own mental health struggles, and she didn't trust anyone in the community other than me. I don't know why. It's not tooting my own horn. That's just what she said. And I asked my rabbi, can I carry my phone on me in case she needs to call me? And he was like, absolutely. Not only can you, but you should. So I think one of the things that we need to do as a community is encourage people to foster relationships with their rabbinic leadership, because sometimes we think, oh, I can't do that because it doesn't align with my spiritual values. It's like, that's not how it works, though. You look to the guidance of the people that know more than you. And even rabbis have rabbis, and even those rabbis have rabbis. And like, it's a never ending, everyone has their spiritual leaders. And that's like, that's part of the thing. It's kind of like the Pirkei Avot thing. Like, you should make yourself a rabbi. That's not just for us, it's for everyone. Like the biggest rabbis in the world, they still go to someone when they're seeking guidance about what they should do, because we don't self-diagnose, we don't treat ourselves, we get guidance from people who give guidance.
And I would add to that. So I think you talked about sort of in the different communities, and I think the degree to which Jewish law guides your life is what is different amongst the different communities. But what I think is the same is that we all live by a set of Jewish values. And there's also a hierarchy of Jewish values. And the top, I would say, which most would agree on, is pikuach nefesh, which means the saving of a life. And you can pretty much, other than murder, do anything. You can break any law in Judaism to save somebody's life. So you can, and that's pretty well known. And obviously, depending on what community you live in, the definition and how broad the definition of saving a life is. And so I think whether it's saving your own life, whether it's saving somebody else's life, that's pretty much top priority. I think it's what guided a lot, when we talk about COVID, it's what guided a lot of people with COVID protocols and what we were going to do. There were synagogues who would not ordinarily use technology, but they did streaming on Shabbat so they could do services and be healthy, those kinds of things. So it's both physical and your mental health as well. And so I think that's kind of where we go with that as well.
And by the way, what you're saying, I think, is pervasive in every community. And the example that's given to me is, if you see someone drowning, we don't steal things. It's not okay to steal. But if someone's drowning and the only way to save them is to steal a life preserver and throw it to them, you must do it. You are compelled by Jewish law to steal the life preserver and throw it to the person. We have a very clear hierarchy of needs, and life is the highest one. And preserving your mental health and keeping yourself mentally well is the highest level. It really is.
For sure.
Great answers. My next question, for those who, draw a lot of, their way of life to some of the stories based in the Torah, the Talmud, can you speak about, and this is to all on the panel, can you speak to a couple stories that stand out in your life when dealing with depression, when dealing with dark days, and how some of those stories help to motivate you to keep you going?
Yeah, I think for me, a lot of writing I've done has been about my connection to Judaism and my connection to mental health. And I've been in the hospital during different holidays before and found connection in finding a way to celebrate that holiday, whether it was like eating the apple crisp off the menu when I was there during Rosh Hashanah, or whether it's lighting the fake candles on Shabbat when I've been there, or whether it's begging them to let me go because I want to be home for a holiday sort of thing. But I think for me, I think of the holiday of Purim, which is a holiday that people say is kind of like a Mardi Gras sort of thing, but it comes with a story in it, and in that story, it talks about being that people, you're supposed to drink as much, and they actually, because of alcoholism and stuff, don't recommend this anymore, or everyone doesn't do this sort of thing. But like there's but you were supposed to drink so much that you didn't know the difference of cursed be Haman, who's the bad guy, or blessed be Mordecai, who's the good guy. And I think what happens when you have mental illness, or at least for me, my experience with mental illness is you're in this state, you're not drunk, but you're in this state that's so messed up that you don't know what's blessed be you and what's cursed be the disease. Mm-hmm. And looking at that story, from finding that even when I can't remember it, that I am a blessing, and this sort of thing. And the disease, maybe not everyone would say it's a curse, and there's parts of it to me that are a curse and aren't, but that to me is the curse, but I'm a blessing. And so to finding that connection and remembering that, and that's something I hold on to.
I love that. Knowing that you are the blessing. That's beautiful. One of the things a lot of times that we say in support group, one of the things I personally live by is my depression is my superpower. I don't look at it as a hindrance. I look at it as something that empowers me to do this work. So some years back, Rabbi Shana, you were part of organizing mental health first aid, which is something that we at NAMI Greater Cleveland also do. I know it was you and Rabbi Allison, I believe.
No, actually, I didn't organize it. I participated in it, and okay. I was really blessed to do it. That was actually for the other job. That was for my campus job. They got us anybody on the year-round staff, and at a certain level, got mental health first aid training. And the way it was explained to us is in the same way when you get like Red Cross first aid. It does not make you a doctor. And you should not, go into hospitals and start performing surgeries. But basically your role is to keep somebody alive until the professionals can get there. And it is the same way with mental health first aid. Your job is to be able to get into a situation and to be able to help until the true professionals get there. If there's a crisis situation, or if somebody's experiencing significant anxiety, whatever it is, it gets you enough training until a trained professional can get there. However, it is something in my other job that I would like to offer to my teachers, because I think even if you're not in crisis mode, there's so much about the training. And I truly believe, surprising coming from the educator that I am, that knowledge is power. And the more that we know, the bigger our toolbox gets, and the more tools we have, just the better off we are in anything that we do. And so it is something I have talked to my colleagues about possibly next year bringing in as part of a continuing ed for my faculty at the synagogue. My program, a lot of supplemental school programs are for like K through 12. Mine is actually lifelong. So my youngest learner is 3 and my oldest is 90. So yeah. So
that is a wide range.
Yeah. So really to have that mental health toolbox for all of my teachers would be an incredible gift to be able to give them. And then just also for them to have that in life. And again, I think we talk about ending the stigma. The more knowledge you have, the greater we decrease the stigma that's out there. The greater understanding we have, and the greater we decrease the stigma.
Absolutely. I do want to also just let everyone in the audience know as well that we at NAMI Greater Cleveland offer mental health first aid training as part of our goal with the faith-based initiative. We've been looking to build the bridge between the respective faith-based communities in Cleveland and NAMI Greater Cleveland resources that we offer. So for example, earlier this year, we had one event focused on the Black church, another event focused on Islam. And we actually ended up partnering with a Black church in the community to promote mental health first aid. And we did a mental health fair with the Islamic community as well. So I just want to offer that NAMI is a resource. This is one of the resources that we do offer to our community, in addition to the other educational programs and support groups. I mean, so the last thing that you had touched on, Rabbi Shana, was the various expressions of Judaism. So there's including Orthodox, conservative, Reform. Can you all on the panel kind of speak to the ways that all respective Jewish communities can come together to help break the stigma in the community, whether that's through meetings at synagogue, within family discussion, or even come into events like this that promote mental health?
Not shocking, mine is going to be that the voice of lived experience needs to be in these places. That, you know, anytime I see a panel on mental health and it's not there, it doesn't, to me, I wonder, you know, what we're caring about and what's going on. And I feel like if, you know, somebody asked a question before about, like, should we, you know, find help in notifying, like finding the people in the Jewish community who have mental illness and helping them out and sort of stuff. And the people in the Jewish community who have mental illness will come out of the woodwork when we have people with lived experience welcomed in that space. So whether it's having them speak from the Bima, or whether that's, you know, having them do some sort of event or do some sort of thing, whatever way that they feel comfortable. If we're doing that, you know, it's not so much that I need to be counseled by a rabbi, just like a rabbi wouldn't fix somebody's broken leg, but the rabbi would visit the person with the broken leg.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the way we're going to be able to visit those people is knowing what they're going through and knowing what is going on. So I mean, to me, that's the biggest thing that needs to take place.
So I would say two things. One is that I totally agree. And Deena's been a speaker many a time. It's very dangerous to be my family member because you get asked to do a lot of things. And I also think that it's important to be an ally and to show that you're an ally. And one of the definitions of an ally I have is like using it as an acronym, and Y is yield the floor. And so it's always to those who have the experience. And I think I do a lot of inclusion work, not just with those, you know, who have live with mental illness, but also, you know, those with learning disabilities and those who are of marginalized identities. And I think the root of all of it comes from the fact, and the root of what I do comes from the fact that each one of us, or my belief is that each one of us are created in God's image.
Yes.
And it's like the Lady Gaga song, Born This Way, you know, God makes no mistakes. Like, we are all exactly who we should be. And we should be not only accepted and respected, but celebrated for Absolutely. That. And so I think that it is when we get up and we do things like the healing prayer in the middle of the service, and the words in the English version that many synagogues sing, thank you, Debbie Freeman, are, you know, a healing of body, and it's what's the Hebrew, but it's a healing of body and a healing of spirit. But it's not just letting the community sing that, it's also the service leader teaching that this is Judaism's belief, like, right, that we don't just pray for people who have a broken leg or, you know, who have diabetes or whatever else it is. We pray for people who are struggling. Body, mind, and spirit are all three things that we pray for every time we offer that healing prayer.
Mhm.
And so the education piece that constantly goes with it. And this is what, our faith believes.
So first of all, I agree with everything that has been said so far. And I also think that just the more communication and the more availability and the more awareness people have, the better. Like this organization, NAMI Cleveland, was started by a couple of influential philanthropists and a rabbi in the Orthodox community. And it was really to meet the need of a very small chunk of people who were resistant to getting help outside of the community. But now it's grown. We have clinicians of multiple different levels of religious affiliation. I'm running all of our clinical stuff, and I'm not trying to talk about knowledge too much, but one thing that I've taken on the initiative of is there are several Jewish schools, YDT, Hebrew Academy, Mizrahi, Mandel, Schechter, Beechwood, that falls into the category too. I reach out to all of the social workers. I am a resource for all of them. It is free of charge. I don't care what color your yarmulke is. That's what I always tell people because I think it's funny. But I'm like, I really don't. I really don't. I'm here to be a resource for the community. I'm here to help meet your needs. And guess what? Every now and again, I get calls from people that aren't part of the Jewish community. They're not from Beechwood, Cleveland Heights. They're on Strongsville. They heard, hey, I heard that you help people get referrals. No problem. I don't care what you do. I'm here to help you get connected, give you education, and make sure you get to the right services that you need to meet your needs. And they're different for everyone. And I find it to be this wildly empowering experience for people where they're like, oh, I didn't even know that resources existed. I didn't know that I could get help. And another thing that I think we can do as a community to kind of bridge these gaps and give people help is for example, I've gotten more calls than you believe of I want to start an AA group that is targeted to the community. And we don't care what your affiliation is, but we want it to be something that you feel comfortable with. Because I mentioned before, a lot of AA groups are in a church, and that's totally fine. And they do amazing stuff. And tons of Jews go to the churches for AA. It'd be nice if there was one in our community too. And why isn't there? Actually, there technically is
two.
Oh, I know of one. Well, one right now is on break because of COVID, but they might be doing something virtually. I'm not really sure. Yeah.
No, we host 2 weekly. I don't know, we're just the host center, so I don't know Jewish.
No, I know about that one, and I've sent people to it, by the way. Hey.
Fridays at 7:30 and at 12.
Yes. So they do exist. That's true. But it should be more readily available. People should know about it. Why not?
For sure.
Communication, education, destigmatization, talking to schools, talking to synagogues, talking to the Rebbeim. That's how we do it.
So my last question, then we're going to open it up to the audience. I think this dialogue is amazing. This is actually for Deena. One of the things that, just speaking from my own personal experience, using art, using music as a form to break the stigma, there weren't a lot of individuals that were using rap music at that time when I started, as opposed to now. Would you say that there are a growing community of Jewish comedians with lived experience that are using that type of dialogue to break the stigma? Is that something that you're seeing in the community?
I think Jewish comedians with neuroses is something that goes back a real long time to the histories of stand-up and comedians, and you can see it every week played out on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Love that show. Love that show.
And that sort of stuff. I think there are a lot of up-and-coming comedians talking about mental health stuff, whether Jewish or not. Maria Bamford is an amazing comedian who talks, who's kind of been she's a hero of mine, and she's amazing at it. And there's a lot of I think I go to stand-up shows and I see more people talk about it. And recently I was doing stand-up and a guy said to me, I don't talk about real life. I want to talk more about it. He was wanting to be able to talk about that part of thing. I think the stand-up stage in a lot of ways is a safe place for it. It feels safer to me than some other communities. I also think, I just want to talk about the word stigma for 1 second, because I think stigma is sometimes just a pretty word for discrimination. And we say it because it's easier to say stigma than it is to say discrimination. People don't want to think that they're discriminating. So just, I often say both, like a slash sort of thing, but because I've experienced both, and I thought, I think stigma is what we do to ourselves. Discrimination is what others do to us, sort of thing, and that sort of thing. But to me, I think, I think for Jewish comedians, it's always fortunately been a safe topic. Gary Shandling discussing his therapy appointments on stage, and the only one who doesn't seem to have neuroses is, or at least that he doesn't seem to be in therapy, is Jerry Seinfeld, and I don't know why that is, but he'll get there eventually. He's just not ready.
Love it.
I think the 900 million probably helps.
Yeah. True.
Man, and that's in our household, we always, my wife and I, we always end the night with Seinfeld. Like she got me hooked. I wasn't even aware of how amazing that show was until I met my wife. But Curb, I've been on for years, so I love it, and I would love to attend a show, Deena, or to hear some of your material. Is there a place that people can go to check out your material?
I normally perform at Imposters Theater, which is in Tremont. I think I'm next doing a Mental Illness and Friends there in January, but if you check out the calendar at Imposters or follow them on social media, that's where I do that. And so, yeah.
Awesome.
That's a great name, by the way.
Awesome. So that wraps up the panel discussion. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, who will be taking questions from the audience for our panelists. So please feel free to type up your question in the chat before we wrap up. I'm so thankful for this conversation. And Melissa, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Archie. And as of right now, I do not see any questions. I do see some very positive comments and a lot of people saying thank you. It's been an amazing show. This has been an amazing forum with phenomenal speakers. Thanks for hosting this discussion. Alleviating barriers to recovery is vital for a person's or a community's health and wellness. Wonderful presentation from you all. Thank you so much. Is there any final questions that you guys would like to ask before we wrap up?
I just want to end with a thought that I heard recently that I think is kind of funny and also a little empowering. The question isn't why do people struggle sometimes? Why do people have depression? Why do people have anxiety? It's really that how is it that in a world that's so uncertain, we're able to so consistently thrive in spite of those uncertainties? And I think that that's a beautiful idea, because I think I said it in my talk earlier, but I really mean it. People are significantly more resilient and stronger than they believe. And when people are struggling, the evidence that they can overcome it is the evidence that they're still here, even though they've already been struggling. People struggle, and they can get through this too.
Absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. Looks like we do have one question that popped in here. Any thoughts on mental health professionals that specialize in working with Jewish individuals, particularly with family histories of trauma? For example, Holocaust survivors.
Any thoughts on mental health professionals? Yeah, it's awesome. I know a lot of trauma specializing therapists. Thankfully, nowadays, there's very few people that I know personally that call where the ripple effects of the Holocaust are really affecting their lives right now. It's more like the generational trauma. It's like, well, they heard a thing from a person who heard a thing. It's kind of like the same way that people have ripple effects from like the horrors of slavery. It's like, well, no one today remembers slavery, but those effects still affect us. But I think it's more likely that people actually experience trauma like in their actual life. And we need professionals that focus on trauma now. And I know lots that do, and it's a heroic thing because it's a very, very hard thing to hear day in and day out. And they're doing a service that is worthy of tremendous praise. And I will also say, quick plug for my friends at JFSA. JFSA has a specialization of working with the much older population and working with Holocaust survivors or the family members of Holocaust survivors. And it's a niche that they not only do, but they do very well. And when those things do come up in my world, even though it is somewhat rare, that's the first place I go. Call JFSA. They know what they're doing. They do a great job.
Any final questions from the audience? All right. Well, at this time, I just want to thank our panelists, Deena Nyer Mendlowitz, Rabbi Shana Nyer, Daniel Solganik. I really appreciate everyone participating. This has been one of our best programs, hands down. I do want to reiterate, we had some great comments in the chat about this event. The best way to let us know and let our funders know how we did is to take a moment to fill out the survey. So I did put that in the chat one final time. This is part of NAMI Greater Cleveland's faith-based initiative. So we will be continuing the series in 2022. I want to thank all of our panelists. I want to thank Melissa for helping with the questions. And I want to thank all of our audience members for attending. This has been Hineni, Mental Health in Judaism, wishing everyone a safe and blessed new year. And we will see you guys later.